Good morning, almost good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to start promptly. So, thank you all for joining us in today's workshop called Kitchen Safety in a COVID-19 World. So, before I introduce our speaker, one second, I'm going to go over a couple of key items, some general housekeeping rules. Right now, everybody is muted. As you can see, there's a slash through the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. We do ask all workshop participants to stay muted throughout the throughout the workshop. Uh, all workshops will be recorded and uploaded to our website at a later date for others to review. If you do not wish to have your video appear in the recording, please disable your video. To ensure that you have a good view of the speaker at all times, please select speaker view. You can adjust this setting in the top right hand corner of your screen. Please type any questions that you may have in the chat box. There will be some time at the end of the workshop for our speakers to answer those questions. So with all that said, our speaker for today's workshop is Pamela Croft. Just a quick little bio on Pamela. Pamela is a professional organizer specializing in kitchen safety for all age groups, but focused on the senior community. She is an advocate of successful aging in place and is the education director of the local chapter of the National Aging in Place Council. Thank you, Pamela, for being here. So everybody, please join me in welcoming her, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you.
Let me.
Is it going to be full screen or is this it?
Is it already in full screen?
I have you and me on the top and then the presentation.
I think this is the.
This is it. Okay,
This is
great. Well then, thank you everyone again for attending, and next slide. I don't have control over the little next slide thing, so you're going to hear me say that all the time. Thank you for the introduction. I just wanted to reiterate that I am a member of the National Association of Professional Organizers. I have also been cooking in other people's kitchens since 2005, and that means that I am a member of the United States Personal Chefs Association. I am a certified Serve Safe food safety manager, and that means that I serve the community with this certification by teaching about food safety to all age groups. And again, I am a member of the National Aging in Place Council, and that means that I have been vetted by them along with all of the other members. So next slide. So today I was asked to speak about fall prevention in the kitchen and highlight and identify some of the actions that happen in your kitchen and want you to have a safe zone there and reduce your risk of falls. Because we're all in our kitchen just a little bit more these days. It's open 24 hours a day now, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. COVID has made us wary of going out to the grocery store, going to restaurants. So home is our option. So next slide. So a lot of times, and you may know this, that when you've lived someplace a long time and have done things a certain way for a long period of time, you can no longer see the dangers. And as people age and start using canes or walkers, there are some hazards that can occur in the kitchen that you just don't see. You need a critical eye to be able to evaluate that. And I have a story about a client. She was a young woman in her mid-30s, and I was organizing her kitchen for her, and I had asked her why she stores her cutting boards underneath the sink next to, Ajax and, ant spray and the garbage can. And she said, well, it's because my mother always had her cutting boards underneath the sink. She just couldn't see that she was running a risk of poison, because these were the cutting boards that she was using for her family to prepare her family's food. So, next slide, please. So, when you may see your kitchen looking like this is what I see. I can point out all of these issues. So, next slide. So, I know some of our other presenters during the week had talked about the dangers that are lurking in both the bathroom and the kitchen in terms of fall risk. So, and I know they've probably made some suggestions, but I'm going to look at it just a little bit differently. When I'm asked to organize someone's kitchen or go in and assess for safety, I always look at it in terms of the zones of the kitchen. There's the eating zone, that's where you sit and have your meals. The baking zone, that's where your stovetop is and your oven. The cleaning zone is where your sink is. And the cooking zone, or I like to call it the preparation zone, those are your countertops and the places that you're actually preparing that food. I look at things in terms of layers, and so should you. So in front of the sink, that's where you need to assess the danger. You need to assess the danger in your eating zone, in your cooking zone, and also in the baking zone. So next slide. Next slide, please. So quite often I start with clearing the client's countertops. And you ask, well, how can that really make a difference? I mean, how can clear countertops prevent falls? Well, you need some place to put things. And you never want to start stacking things up on the floor if you don't have clear countertops. So next slide. So this is what I mean. Where on this countertop could you possibly prepare your food? And when you're bringing in groceries, and now we're probably bringing in a little bit more than just that one bag at a time. So if you don't have any place to put things, and if you don't have any place to safely prepare your food, and you're constantly moving things around, you're starting to increase your fall risk. So this is an example of having the groceries on the floor, which you never want to do. So next slide. So let's talk about bringing home the groceries. For an example, in my home, I live in a townhome, and when I come home, I park in the garage. I have to walk up a flight of stairs. I have to open up the fire door that leads into my house, more stairs. I have to walk through the living room, walk through the dining room in order to get to my kitchen. That's a problem. And that would be a problem for a lot of folks, especially if you're older and you have some disabilities or your mobility is impaired in any way. So how I solved my problem was that I only carry one bag of groceries up at a time from the garage. That way I have one hand free for the railing or the banister. I've installed a kick bar for the fire door. I know you're not supposed to, but in this case, I thought it was more important to have that stopper there so the door remains open. So I'm never standing on that landing and trying to hold the door open while I'm walking in with groceries. I've made sure that I have no trip hazards, and by that I mean throw rugs in the hallway. The other set of stairs didn't have a banister. I had one installed, so I'm safe there also. I made sure that I have a clear runway through my dining room, and that means the chairs pushed in all the time so that I'm able to get through that space with groceries. My countertops are clear so that I never have to put things on the floor. By putting things on the floor, it's a trip hazard, and it's another type of hazard because if there's anything cold or anything leaks, you now have a wet spot on your floor. So next slide, please. So here's an example of why we need clear counters and clear pathways. Let me just identify some of these hazards. First of all, the door from, that's probably from the garage. Right away, there's things hanging in the door that you're going to get hooked on. There's a chair in the way. There's all kinds of things in front of the refrigerator, stacked up recyclables. You have cords hanging from the countertop, which you could easily catch and then fall. So great example of, and this is a lot of times what I walk in and see. So next slide. So the overlooked hazards that I really want everyone to be made aware of in this presentation is that our drawers and cupboard doors, make sure that you can close them all the way. I know sometimes when you've been living in your home for a long time, things are slightly ajar and you just get used to it. But just you have to make sure that everything can close all the way so you don't get caught on it. Make sure that your table chairs and your bar stools are always pushed in and out of the way. Bar stools are a huge hazard around those cooking islands. Pet bowls and toys. This is a big one. If you can avoid it, have the dog or cat feeding bowls someplace out of the pathway. Even if it means changing things up a little bit, you want to make sure that's out of there. And pet toys should never be allowed in the kitchen. Again, extension cords. You don't want anything hanging down, and you don't want, people sometimes have things plugged in on their kitchen table, and it's in their kitchen, and they just, they don't think about it, and that extension cord or the plug might be in the way of a chair leg. So when you pull out the chair leg and you're sitting in it, all of a sudden the chair falls over. Garbage cans are another huge hazard. I don't like to recommend that you always keep it underneath your kitchen sink, but sometimes that is the best place. If you do have one, make sure it's not in a pathway. I see it all the time. People put them right in next to the refrigerator, in the space that they have between their countertop and their refrigerator. They put that garbage can and they knock into it all the time. So next slide, please. So this is an example of a really neat kitchen, but the hazard here are those 4 chairs and where that kitchen table is located. If you're using a walker or a cane, or you have any type of fall risk, you want to reconsider this. If there's only the 2 of you living at home now, do you really need 4 chairs? I have a client, Mary and Carl, love them dearly, been in their home hundreds of times. They have 2 entrances to their kitchen, from the dining room and from the garage. And it's a very old-fashioned kitchen. It's a U shape. And they have a small table up against the wall with 3 chairs. And the chair that they don't use is always slightly ajar. And every single time you come in from either one of those entrances, you risk tripping over that 3rd chair. So finally, I was able to convince them that they needed to get away. They needed to do away with that chair. And it's still not the best situation because they still have to walk by that table. In my opinion, that table should be moved and it should not be in their kitchen, especially since she uses a walker. So next slide. So throw rugs. Public enemy number 1. I'm sure some of my colleagues have also talked about this during the week. I'm sure you know it. I'm sure you've heard it many, many times, but you really want to get rid of those rugs. The only place that you should have a throw rug, and it should be a rubber mat, would be in front of your sink. Actually, that's a good place for one. And in front, and if your dishwasher isn't next to your sink, there should be a rubber mat in front of that also, because that's where all the drips happen. When as a personal chef and I go to people's homes and I see one of these decorator rugs in front of the stove, I roll it up because I can't run the risk of being in an unfamiliar kitchen and tripping over someone's rug. If you don't want to get rid of your rugs, you can use something like the tape that goes around the edges. I don't really recommend that for a kitchen. These kind of those wafer mats are okay, but a lot of times it becomes two tripping hazards instead of just one. You trip over the rug, and then the wafer thing is exposed, and your foot gets stuck on that, and you can trip there too. So next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So in my home, and my recommendation for all of my clients is, and I'm not selling Gel Pro mats, it's just that I really have found that this absolutely is a wonderful solution. They have beveled edges. You cannot trip on them. The ones with the beveled edges are something new that they've offered maybe the last 4 or 5 years. They never curl up. They're very heavy. So even moving them is a bit of a challenge, and they're soft. Do not use bare feet though. I couldn't find a slide that didn't have someone standing on a Gel Pro mat with shoes on. And the mats are expensive, but they do last a long time. I know that, I don't think Crate and Barrel, but Bed Bath and Beyond, they have their version of it, and they're okay, but just make sure that they have a beveled edge. So next slide. So if anyone has a cat, I'm sure you get this joke. They do run ahead of you, and they have a tendency to want to turn around and make sure that you're still there. So next slide, please. I used to swear that my cat was trying to kill me. So we love our pets. They're cute, but they have no place in the kitchen. These two dogs are laying on a trip hazard. They're a trip hazard laying on a trip hazard. So enough said about this. Next slide. My motto, remember, just because it's always been there doesn't mean it should be. Sometimes things need to change. And if we're going to reduce the risks in our kitchen, sometimes things need to be done. Try not to be defensive about things having to change. I run against this all the time. I just, it's always been there. Why can't it be here? So that's my motto. Next slide. We want to think about safety first, obviously. And step stools are an issue, or what people think are step stools. Pulling the kitchen chair over and standing on it to get something from the upper cupboard is not a step stool. The one that is recommended for fall prevention is the type that has a railing. So you not only have the 2 or 3 steps, and you don't want anything more than that, 2 or 3 steps, and it should have a railing. Most of these fold up so they're out of the way. So next slide. We want to remember, when we're going to be reorganizing things in our kitchen, is that you want to think about how high you can reach and how low you can reach without having to bend down or get down on the floor on your knees. Because every time you get down on the floor and try to get up, you're risking a hazard of that. So we want to move things from high and low and put everything in the middle. And next slide. So everything needs to be easy to reach. I know sometimes, like, this is a great shot. She's got a wonderful situation there. The cupboard is lit, but she's getting on her knees to do that. I can't do that anymore. It's very difficult for me to be doing that all the time. And I'm short. A lot of my clients have lost a little bit of height, and they're always using, even if it's a little tiny step stool like this, You still want to avoid that. We need to put everything in the middle, everything that we use. So next slide. Rearranging isn't easy to do. It almost will never get done unless you have someone to help. So that means enlisting a family member, professional help, uh, get some friends over. And you want to start with clear countertops because you're going to be emptying out everything from the shelves in the cupboards. And at that time, it's a good idea to put everything out on your countertop table, sift through everything, find out, which are the coffee cups and the tea cups that you use all the time, which are the cooking lids that you use all the time, the pots that you use all the time. And this is a good time to eliminate any extra and unwanted stuff. You want to make sure that when you're doing this task of rearranging, that you allow enough time to finish completely. You don't want to get started with it and then find out you don't have enough time and then end up putting everything back. You become frustrated. So allowing enough time. And then also a pro tip from me is that when you do decide that you want to get rid of some of the stuff, things that are broken, things that you don't use anymore, and you put them in boxes and bags, you need to get them out of the house right away. And that means either carrying them to the trash can right away or putting them in the trunk of your car or in the garage ready for a pickup from a charity group. Because if you don't do that, it just ends up being another tripping hazard. So you want to be able to do that. So may I have the next slide? There's some great options. There's pullouts, and companies like Shelf Genie, they will come to your home and install these. It's not really all that expensive. Places like Container Store have very affordable options for this. I think some of them are like in the $40, $50 range. And this then will eliminate the need for you to get down on your knees. Pot lids are also something that people are always searching for. They're always falling on the floor. So dedicate some cupboard space or the precious shelf countertop space to have one of these lid holders. They're very inexpensive. They're like $5-6 and they're worth their weight in gold because you never have to bend over again to get your favorite pot lid. Other inexpensive things that you can do are in your cupboards where you keep small items or you keep some food items. You can use just inexpensive baskets and that works out well. So next slide. Another great option are hanging pots. I know sometimes the ones that are over the stovetop are a little bit too high and things start to get a little bit too heavy, but hanging things on the wall is a great option. Just simple pegboards, they work really well. So I always suggest this. I had a client, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. She had severe vertigo, and that meant that anytime she had to stand on even one of those short stools, she got dizzy. And it was so severe that actually anytime she had to lean over, she got a little bit of dizziness also. So what we did for her was emptied out all of her shelves, every single cupboard in her enormous kitchen. And I was able to move all the shelves down so that she was able to easily reach every single thing in her kitchen. It took hours, but it did work. And actually one of our solutions for her potware was to hang them. So next slide. We also want to talk about how dangerous your pantry, and by this I don't mean necessarily a walk-in pantry. A pantry is really anywhere in your kitchen where you keep your foodstuffs. It becomes a hazard when it's overly full. You run the risk of when you are reaching for things or you're trying to rearrange everything, all of a sudden the glass jar falls and the oil has now broken and it's all over the floor. or the vinegar breaks, or the rice bag opens up and you've got that all over the place. Dog food is one that I see a lot. They're crammed in, they fall over, and all of this now becomes a tripping hazard. So next slide. And we really don't want to be fumbling in the dark, because if you fumble in the dark, you will fall in the dark. And I'm speaking from personal experience, because I share my home with someone who is an extreme fall risk. So we have made sure that all of our rooms have either motion sensor lights, which are extremely helpful. I know one of my colleagues who spoke probably earlier this week, they were talking about them in the bathroom. The kitchen, bathroom and bedroom are great places. Kitchen is also a wonderful place. This light switch, that's a great idea, because when you walk into the room, you want to be able to find your light switches. And that's another reason for the clear countertop and the clear pathways into your kitchen, because a lot of times people will have on those entrances into the kitchen, they'll have their light switch. I had a client who decided from the garage into the kitchen, on that wall where the light switch is, that's where they decided to hang all of their aprons and broom handles and all of that. So every time they came into the kitchen at night in the dark, they had to fumble for that light switch. So you want to make sure that's all clear. You want to make sure they're clear on your countertops too, that you don't have that great big mix maxer that you never use anymore parked right in front of that light switch. You also want to make sure that you always have a flashlight accessible in your kitchen, especially if your kitchen has an entrance or exit out of the house, because during an emergency, you want to be able to make sure that you can find that light switch. I always recommend this type. My friends who are interior designers hate me for suggesting this because it doesn't look very good, but it's really, really safe. So next slide. And when we do focus on our kitchen, the purpose is we want to make sure that we can see clearly what is directly in front of us when we walk into the room. So that means if you've had a leak during the night out of your trash can or underneath the sink and there's water on the floor, you want to be able to turn on that light and to be able to see that hazard. So another safety hazard, not particularly about falls, but under your countertops, as we age, our eyesight starts to diminish a little bit. Sometimes our knife skills aren't as great. If you have really good lighting on your countertops, that's a safety issue. Stovetop, a lot of people do have lights above their stove, but a lot of times they let that light burn out. Over your sink, you want to be able to see what you're doing. And again, the entrances to the kitchen should have a light switch or some form of light, even if it's a motion sensor. So next slide. So in the cooking in the COVID world, I'm sure you'll identify with this. We're spending more time in our robes and our pajamas while we're cooking. That is a safety hazard. I know I've been guilty of it. And when I do it, I think, shame on me. So next slide. I want to be talking a little bit about our cookware. And by cookware, I am not talking about our pots and pans. Never walk around barefooted or with just stockings, just your socks, or in flimsy slippers. All of the shoes that you wear in the kitchen for cooking should have a back to them or a strap. You don't want to be wearing mules. Flip-flops are a definite hazard. Closed-toed shoes are the best. They make a range of slippers now that have grips on the bottom. So that will prevent some slipping. You do not want to wear shawls or scarves or any type of clothing with bell sleeves or loose sleeves, because you run the risk of hooking that sleeve or the scarf on one of your cabinet handles. And it happens all the time. Actually have hooked myself, have hooked my robe belt on that. And you can hook it also on a banister and fall from there. So you want to make sure that you don't wear any of that type of clothing. And the same thing goes for loose jewelry. Bracelets are a hazard. They will get caught both on pot handles and on the drawer pulls. So you want to make sure you're not wearing jewelry. And the next slide, please. So the last thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is the kitchen smoke alarm. I know, kitchen accidents happen. Sometimes we have very sensitive smoke alarms in our kitchen, and you should have one in your kitchen. When that smoke alarm goes off, especially when it's by mistake, it's loud, and you become a little sometimes disorientated, sometimes a little panicky. So that is not the time to try to figure out how to reach that smoke alarm to stop it. So I want you to practice how you're going to reach your smoke alarm in case it does go off. And you need to do this anyway once a year when you check the batteries. So if you're not going to do it yourself, on your refrigerator door or someplace close by, have the phone number of a neighbor, someone who could come over right away and help you, someone who can climb that ladder and do it for you. But you could also, there are products now on the market that are these extending poles, and they have a little tiny pointer so you can reach up and get that smoke alarm button. I had somebody tell me one time that they used a broom handle where the broom screws in. They just undid that so that they had the curly part, and they were using that as, to test their smoke alarm. So those are good alternatives. So I know I probably have still a little bit of time. So could we open it up for questions? No questions? Someone?
Yes, so if
Okay.
anybody has questions, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I can definitely read those out to Pamela. I do have one that came from my end, and I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I'm assuming that this person wants to know about COVID and getting food from the stores, such as fresh veggies. Um,
Yes.
is that a,
Sure. I had just talked about
yeah.
this the other day. Um, we should, according to the Food and Drug Administration, the WHO, and the FDA, we do not have to worry about food, our foodstuffs, as being a source of COVID. We know this because of SARS and MERS, which are also coronaviruses. This coronavirus is novel. That means it hasn't been around. But we know from their research and evidence that we do not transmit the disease through food. Yes, having said that, if someone in the grocery store who is actively has COVID and they breathe, touch, sneeze, cough on that apple, and you pick up that apple with your bare hands, touch it, and then rub your eyes or your nose or your mouth, yes, there is a possibility that you could. But viruses are different than bacteria. Bacteria grows on everything. Viruses need a living host. So, and there has to be a great deal of it's called viral load. There has to be a great deal of that virus on the food and the packaging that it comes in. So cardboard, um, you know, I think they said it was like 72 hours for, no, it's 24 hours for cardboard and 72 hours for plastics and stainless steel. But just because the virus is on there doesn't mean that there is enough of it to infect you. But it's a good idea if you are extremely worried when your packages come in from outside. You put them on that clean countertop, clear countertop, unpack everything, wash your hands, wash that countertop, wash your hands again. So that's the solution for that.
We have one more question. Knife storage recommendations for people on warfarin.
Oh, right. Okay, so we are now at a higher risk for bleeding when you do have nicks, cuts. First of all, we want to make sure that in our knife drawer are only knives. We don't want to have a sharp knife, any kind of knife, especially a dull knife, really, that's more dangerous. They should be absolutely separate from your spoons and can opener and all of those types of things. We want to make sure that they are in their designated spot. I recommend, if you don't have space, that you put in a metal, a magnet bar and hang your knives there. You want to make sure you have a sharp knife. Dull knives are our enemies. And if you can't remember the last time you sharpened your knives, make sure you do get them sharpened. You never want to put a knife in the sink, especially if the sink is filled with water. We want to make sure that when we're preparing our food and we're using our knives, the sharp edge of the knife is always pointing away from you when it is on the countertop. We never want to cover up our knives with anything. So you don't want to put a towel over it while you're doing something else. Make sure you have enough space when you're cooking. Another reason for having a clear countertop, enough space so that you're not pressured or stressed by having everything else on the countertop.
All right.
Boy, that was a long answer.
We have definitely more time for questions if anybody has some last minute questions. I'll give it a couple seconds.
Let me see if I forgot anything.
So we have one. Do you recommend reacher tools?
Yes, you can, but doesn't it make more sense though, really, to have that, whatever it is that you're using that reacher tool for, to have it actually within your reach rather than having to do that? I personally don't recommend them, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's just it's a better idea to start calling out things from your cupboards so that you do have room for the things that you need. We don't need to be having 18 different types of pots and 3 of this and 3 of that. If it's just the 2 of you, if your strength isn't, if you're not as strong as you used to be, you don't want to be keeping things like your cast iron frying pan stored in your oven, because that means that every time you want to use your oven, you have to take that heavy cast iron out of your oven. And then, God forbid, should you forget that it's in there, turn on the oven, now you have a hot, heavy cast iron pot that you have to find someplace to put. So going back to the reacher thing, if you're reaching for things that are breakable with one of those, what if you make a mistake and then that falls down and breaks? And again, you have oil all over the place, or you have glass shards. Well, that was another thing, talking about fall prevention, is that If you have open cupboards, open shelves, and you've got that beautiful blue glass all on that shelf, or if you're storing plates and things like that, we live in earthquake country. It's not really, I always suggest people to get rid of those, because all you need is a small tremor and those things are going to fall. They're going to all break, and then you're going to have to take care of that. I know if the big one hits, all of our cupboard doors are going to open and everything we have is going to fall out and break. But if we can avoid just something so unnecessary as just having a couple of glasses fall and break, you know, just, think about those hazards. We really want to be aware of the hidden dangers that we can no longer see because we've lived in a place too long and done things too long the same way.
Okay. I have another question from my end. Do you always need Clorox-based cleaning product for kitchen countertop sinks, microwave interiors?
I didn't quite get the first part of the question.
So, do you always need Clorox-based cleaning products for kitchen countertops, sinks, microwave interiors? I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Commercial brands of any kind of cleaning product that says antibacterial is our best bet for food safety and our food safety protocols in our homes, especially older Americans, older adults. Our immune systems are weakened a little bit anyway. And now during COVID, we want to make sure that our immune systems are nice and strong. So keeping the bacterial count down on our countertops, microwaves, our handles. Yes, hot soapy water works well also, especially for viruses because it breaks down that virus cell. But yeah, anything that's has a little bit of bleach in it is the best. I know that's what everybody is recommending. There are some do-it-yourself recipes on the internet. I looked at them the other day, and there's dozens of them. I won't repeat exactly what they are, but it's a percentage of Clorox, unscented Clorox bleach to water. It's something like, don't quote me, 5 tablespoons to a gallon or something like that. Yes, that works. Spray. We want to make sure that we get all of our high touch areas, and not just because of COVID, but because of any type of bacteria. We want to make sure that we're getting our door handles in the kitchen. A lot of times the place that we all forget about and if you have a stove that also has push buttons, the microwave push buttons, we will always want to give those a wipe down, as often as possible. I'm never in favor of dishcloths. Sponges are a good alternative, especially if you're going to be microwaving them to, keep them bacteria free, washing them in the wash machine, changing our dish towels on a regular basis. We don't want to be having one dish towel all week. We need to change them frequently. It's the same with the sponge. Insides of microwaves, all of our countertops, door handles, cupboard door handles, refrigerator door handle.
I'm just gonna put a plug in there. I know you mentioned the guidance for the Clorox and water based solution to clean. I'm putting in a link.
Oh, hey,
This is a one-stop shop where you can find some cleaning and disinfecting guidance, also a little bit of food safety guidance. I know you mentioned
yeah,
a lot of those, so and that web page is continuously updated. So please feel free to explore that site.
right. And I want to add
Hmm.
the products that we use to clean hard surfaces should never be used on our food. Rinsing fresh vegetables and fruit in running water is the best way. Um, I know they sell those products that are supposed to dissolve the wax and that sort of thing, and fine if you feel strongly about it. Those yellow scrubbies that you can get at the store, they've got kind of like a net around them. Those are good for washing cantaloupes, apples, oranges, grapefruits, that sort of thing, potatoes. They work well for that. But no, you never want to use any Clorox or alcohol-based product on your food. You will get an upset stomach. And also remember, if you're going to be using a bleach solution on your countertops, use the bleach solution and then clear water. We don't want that residue of Clorox to be on your countertop, or you could accidentally ingest it. And if you're going to make your own solution, it needs to be properly labeled. You don't want a solution like that unlabeled sitting around.
Great.
We've got to put up my cute question. There we go.
Oh, we went.
There you go. There you go.
It's great. Thank you so much for
You're very
for all the
welcome.
valuable information. I know you put in a lot of tips there with COVID and with emergency preparedness. So thank you so much for all that great information.
You're very welcome. And if anybody took down my number, I'd be happy to take a phone call if you have a question and we didn't get to it today.
Yes. And if not, you can email our email address to healthierliving.hhsa@sdcounty.ca.gov. We can definitely make sure that those questions do get to Pamela Croft. And with
Well,
that,
thank you, everyone. I like doing these things in person. When you do it here, oh, we stopped already recording, huh? Or we are?
no, we're still going.
Well, I missed everybody's cheerful face and, the banter back and forth. Sometimes that makes the talk go easier for the speaker, because, we get a little bit more input. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah. And if we have actually 2 workshops left. If you want to take a break and join in an active class at 12:30, we have Mind, Body, and Balance going on. And then we have fall prevention screening and getting up safely after fall later on at 2 p.m. So I encourage you to go to www.sandiegofallprevention.org if you still want to join those classes. And yes. Did you have any?
So if you wanted to do that, you sign out now and then you can sign back in for the other classes?
Yes,
Or you
correct.
have to sign in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes our workshop. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and hope you all stay safe.